Before switching to architecture, I studied economics for 2 years. I was a disaster. I could not, for the love of God, understand anything. So it was really non-understandable for me, so I just went to the polar opposite, which in Italy was architecture, where people slept in the school and we were 15,000 and we lived with goats and mice and rats. So this was really a big problem, the problem of trying to quantify human behavior. And it's a similar issue that we will discuss today, which is how to communicate culture in a way and in a fashion that can have currency amongst policymakers and people that administer budgets. And you know, we can start with Baron Kelvin's quote that I often say that when you can measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. The topic for tonight comes from also a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for a long time. The whole idea of R&D started in 2008 during the financial crisis. Of course, it took us a little while, like 4 years, to make it happen. But the whole impetus was the fact that I thought that finally people would see the light and realize that the financial system was less reliable than the so-called cultural sector. And that even though the progress provided by the cultural sector, by culture, is lower, it is nonetheless more dependable and holistic. And I thought that at that time, we could position museums as the R&D of society, hence the whole idea of the R&D department for MoMA. Because as a matter of fact, how do you measure something like Cézanne's Bather? And how do you make the powers that be realize that it's something that needs to be supported because it goes to the benefit of the bottom line of a city, a nation, a whole culture? Let's see how museums quantify themselves, because the metrics of museums can be an example that we can begin with tonight. You know, this is one of MoMA's first exhibitions, Cézanne, Gauguin, Seurat, and Van Gogh in 1929, and this is how the museum took the metrics of it. And of course, today, the metrics of museums still rely on the number of exhibitions, the number of visitors, and the number of members, but we know that these particular metrics are not completely reliable. They do not truly measure the whole success and the whole impact of a museum's activity. And you know, we can keep on going with numbers. You know, like the Met last year had 55 exhibitions, 6.28 million visitors, and it has 171,322 members. MoMA, 30 exhibitions, 2.93 million, 140,000 plus members. Philadelphia Museum of Art, you know, so you can really discuss them like that. But what does that mean? There needs to be a context. There needs to be a context that is a city, that is a mission, that is the actual education and how this particular program stimulates visitors and inhabitants around it. Also, there are metrics that try to extrapolate the economic impact of individual exhibitions or programs over the economy of a city. And here is the press release that last year, 2 years ago, was issued by the Metropolitan Museum that was talking about the McQueen, Cara, and Sarah exhibition and Rooms with a View stimulating 908 million economic impact for New York City. The scale of intervention and measurement is also interesting. In many countries in the world, there are ministries and institutions that are devoted to culture. You see here, for instance, the DCMS from the UK, which, interesting, is the Department for Culture, Media, and Sport. So these are assembled together, while elsewhere you have the communications and information that are grouped together. This is Singapore, and it's MICA, that also has museum and cultural institutions under it. The Ministry of Culture of the Government of India, Republic of Slovenia, Culture France, South Africa. Interestingly, it's several states in Asia that have the most forward-looking policy when it comes to the creative industry and to the cultural sector. There are few countries that really believe, like Singapore or even Indonesia, that culture and the creative industries will be their future. As you can see here, when we extrapolate and we expand to the creative industries, you see here a graph by Richard Florida from his website creativeclass.com that shows how in the first years of the 21st century, the creative sector, which includes also fashion, advertising, design, so everything that is about the production and exploitation, that's the official definition of information, has been increasing tremendously, and also the percentage of workforce by decade. So it's quite obvious that there's something to it, and this is the creative classes percentage of population in Canada and in the United States. So you see how in some parts of the United States, it's even more than 35% of the population of different parts of the country that is occupied in the creative industries. And this is the PLUS project by Philips conducted in Singapore, whereby Philips interviewed, it's kind of feasible in Singapore perhaps, a few thousand Singaporeans on their quality of life. And we hope that the answers were completely free and honest. And last but not least, the quality of life index via nation ranking. But I would like to close with this quote. It would be nice if all of the data which sociologists require could be enumerated, because then we could run them through IBM machines and draw charts as the economists do. However, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted, as William Bruce Cameron said in 1963. It's absolutely true, and we're going to discuss it today. So I'm going to introduce tonight's speakers in order of appearance. We're going to start with Bob Crees. He is professor in the Department of Philosophy at Stony Brook University, and also Jer, over here, Jer Thorpe, has been an artist in residence at the New York Times for 28 months instead of 4. He started out, he was supposed to be there for 4 months, and then he stayed for 28. Afterwards, we're going to listen from Kate Levin. Kate Levin is the commissioner for the Department of Cultural Affairs of New York City. And last but not least, we have Andrew Ross. Andrew is a professor in the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis at New York University. I've gone a little too far, and I would like to call on stage right now Bob Crees for our first presentation. Thank you.